Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Universal Church of Truth here at Murphy's Multiverse. I am one half of your host, Hunter.
I am the other half, Mary.
That's Mary, wherever Mary is in comparison to me. Um, Today, we are talking about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Um, just a little movie that people are probably going to go see. Uh, Sequel to one of Marvel's biggest movies ever, and something that we did a Theory Thursday video on as well. If you guys haven't seen our Theory Thursday video on Black Panther Wakanda Forever, pause this now and go watch it and then come back to this. It's going to be like 2 full hours of us talking, and no one wants to spend their day doing anything else other than listening to Mary and I talk about Black Panther. So, um, I have now seen this movie twice. I got to go see a screening. I was very lucky to go do that, and then I went to go see an opening weekend with some friends. Mary has now seen this movie. Mary had not seen this movie when we recorded our last Black Panther video. So I will ask off the top, Mary, what are your general thoughts, feelings, opinions, concerns about Black Panther Wakanda Forever?
Yeah, I mean, I really loved it. The executive summary is, I think like all of its individual parts and what it was doing were like phenomenal. I, however, did feel like it was so packed that like I was constantly noticing like scenes being kind of abruptly cut short, and like so like that the kind of like doing a lot. Like I think most people are like pretty much agree like they put a lot into that movie. And even though it was almost 3 hours, I still like felt like I couldn't not notice like I wish it had a chance to breathe more. And I've seen a lot of people say that's what they felt it did, so I don't know what my issue is, but like everything about it, like like was great. Like all the performances were like absolutely outstanding. I loved the general plot of Namor coming in there. I obviously they had to deal with a lot of emotions, and I think they did. Like that movie, like was heavy, and not just in like the very traditional like sad way, but like the whole time it was just like this oppressive force, like of like heaviness emotionally,
Yeah.
and like, they managed to like literally sustain that for 3 hours. Like in those respects, it was incredible. I do feel like a few things were in it too much that I thought took away from some of those great things, and then it felt a bit rushed at times. That's my
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I'm not both times I watched it, I don't know as if I thought it felt rushed. I do think there was some stuff in the movie that didn't need to be in the movie. I do think that I don't know. I don't know as if I felt like themes were cut short or anything like that personally. I do think that the movie had this monumental task of juggling the sequel that they had always wanted to make for Black Panther. I think Ryan Coogler's made it very clear that this conflict between Wakanda and Namor and Talokan and all that sort of stuff. I think that like he's always wanted to do that, and a lot of the themes that were present in this movie, I think, are things that were always the plan for this movie. Um, and then you have this added task of mourning someone who was so loved by everyone, and incorporating that into the movie. And I do think it's a lot to have to juggle in one movie, and you have a movie that was already going to be very heavy on this theme of grief, and then you throw in like very real, like real world grief on top of that, and that's it is a lot. And I can see how that that's a lot for a creative to have to juggle, and I think it's a lot for people to have to process. I mean, both times I watched the movie, I was definitely crying at the end. Like even the second time, I was like, oh, I already know what's gonna happen, so like I'll be more prepared. And then I was watching it, and I was still sobbing. By the time it ended, I was like, this is a very emotional movie, and they pull off the emotional beats really well. I think like I do think it honors Chadwick in a really beautiful way. I think they did that very very well. And I think that everything involving Namor and like why Namor and Wakanda and Shuri and all of them are in conflict, I think that's also done very well, and I think that that's like fleshed out pretty well. But I do see your point. Um, as we get into breaking this down, Mary, are there a few things from our Theory Thursday video that you noticed did come true, and some things that you noticed didn't come true? Because I feel like we have to go back now and we have to compare some of the theories you came up with and see how close you got.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving me a lot of credit to like remember that video, but hold on, what was I?
I
Yeah,
have a
I
list.
forgot
I have
my
a list in
sentence. So I just,
front.
I mean, some of the things that were like rumors that like I kind of knew were true for a long time, like those happened. I mean, like the
Yeah.
vibranium like sensing machine. I don't know why that wasn't like it's a spoiler, I guess, because I didn't talk about it beforehand. But like those things. So like that's a big one. I, what else did I say? I I did okay. I felt like Everett Ross was relatively what I thought he would be. I didn't think he'd have like a big role, and
Right.
he didn't. I mean, that's like a whole other conversation we can
We'll
have.
get into that because that's on the
Yeah.
list.
But I don't remember the other
All
things.
right, so we're gonna go down the list of theories that Mary came up with during Theory Thursday, and we're gonna see what ones came true and which ones didn't, and that's gonna be the first part of this little video breakdown. Number one, Mary said that she felt like Shuri was going to become Black Panther, and guess what, guys? That's true. That was an obvious one. That was a really easy one.
I
Um,
like the movie like didn't even like the movie just like once she made the synthetic heart shaped herb like she just went like the movie there was nothing so it was so weird to me and I think you said this last time actually like how you were just surprised people were debating it in the first place
yeah,
and that's kind of how the movie was like too I don't know but I don't know why like teasers they were I guess because it happened later in the movie I don't know but yeah yeah that's right.
yeah. So again, and like we said in our Theory Thursday video, but for those who didn't watch it and are watching this one, Shuri becoming Black Panther, there's very much precedence for that in the comic books. Like there are multiple arcs. A big one in the I don't even remember. It's like early to mid 2000, late 2000s, somewhere in there. I think it was around like Civil War times of Marvel where like T'Challa leaves Wakanda for like a elongated period of time, and Shuri takes over as like the protector of Wakanda and becomes Black Panther, and this is a whole thing. So I did always think it was kind of strange that people thought that Shuri might not become Black Panther. I don't really know where that thought came from, aside from maybe like people really liking M'Baku and Okoye and like maybe that's just a credit to how well they've written a lot of the characters in these movies that people thought like any one of them could be Black Panther and it would work. but
Yeah, and then people would
um,
be like, happy with like just the
yeah,
range of characters. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
yeah. Um, so you said that. Although I will say on the topic of this, let's just use this list to jump around the whole movie. So Shuri becomes Black Panther. Shuri does not become Black Panther until like the third act. There is not a Black Panther in this movie for most of it, if we're being honest. And then there is one, and Shuri is not the kind of Black. Honestly, that was one of my big surprises for the movie was like the kind of Black Panther that Shuri ended up being. Um, I don't know why, but I didn't expect her arc to be that she was going to be as angsty and angry as she was, but I do really like that. I think they handled it really, really well. But I'm curious your thoughts on like Shuri's arc in this movie and the way she becomes Black Panther and how she handles that once she takes on the mantle and all
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I was also surprised. And I mean, like obviously a lot has happened between the first movie and this one, both real life and not. So like
Yeah.
the fact that it didn't necessarily follow from like the last time we've seen her is like makes sense. But then it did catch me. And to be fair, like obviously she was very for lack of a better word, like negative in a lot of ways throughout the film. You know, like you saw that early on when she would have conversations with her mom and just be like, that wasn't, you know, T'Challa, that was just your brain, you know, just kind of that kind of thing. So that tracked. But I will say, I did not know that Michael B. Jordan and Killmonger was going to be in this movie. Like, I feel like I see people tweet about shit like they want it, but I really didn't know. So that actually caught me by surprise when she did. I really enjoyed that, and he in his few seconds, minutes, I don't know, like crushed it. But yeah, that I think was kind of the very much more obvious moment of okay, sure, it's not the Black Panther we would have expected or that T'Challa was. But I was expected they went like hard into the Killmonger kind of
Yeah.
person. Not that it was like bad. I was also
Right
aware
down to like
of that.
her Black Panther suit is
Yeah,
more reminiscent of Killmonger's Black Panther suit than T'Challa's, which is like you see that in we've seen this Black Panther suit in the trailers and commercials or whatever, and you're just like, oh yeah, gold highlights. Like that's a very like classic Black Panther having gold highlights on the suit. That's I didn't think anything of it. And then watching the movie and the way they have her like walk past T'Challa's helmets and go towards the one with like the gold highlights and the like gold spots on the forehead, and that is very like Killmonger, and the way they place that scene after the conversation with Killmonger seems very intentional, and like I never put two and two together in
yeah,
the lead up to this, which I do like. I had a feeling that they might find a way to bring Michael B. Jordan in somehow, but I didn't expect it to be her soul was relating more to like his vibe than the rest of her family.
yeah. I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, it felt a little lack of a better word, like out of nowhere, like in
Yeah.
the moment, but like obviously conceptually, like you can like track why that makes sense. And again, Michael B. Jordan like crushed it in that scene, and all of the actors just like I don't just on another level. So the fact that I felt like he really outacted Letitia Wright in that scene, it's like saying something. Because obviously she crushed it too, but I don't know. He left an impression. So that was a fun one that I didn't know. I will say, and this probably can help us jump to something else, or we can still do. But I was very surprised in that scene she didn't see her mom, because that had been a relationship that drove the whole film. Um, and so I liked Michael B. Jordan. I'm glad he was there, but I also kind of feel like it was robbed a little bit of like that last sort of moment because I didn't have that. And I get like later on she has like the flashes of it, which I don't fully know why that makes sense. But I was like shocked that they killed off Queen, also known as
Yeah, and I
yeah,
I consistently wonder, and this is just how my brain works, like what parts of this movie were always the plan and what parts of this movie came later, because part of me feels like Ramonda dying at the hands of Namor was like always the
yeah,
idea. Like I think I feel like even if like T'Challa had been the star of this movie, Ramonda dying in Namor's attack on Wakanda was like always a plot point. That's what that felt like to me, and just when they had to then add T'Challa's death to the movie. Now there's two funerals in the movie, but it kind of works for like what they're going with. Um yeah, I was surprised. I was not expecting that. I felt like them grieving T'Challa's death was gonna be like enough for one movie, and
that's
then them
why I
also
was like,
throwing
what?
Angela Bassett in there was like, oh, all right.
Because she really, and it's hard to like talk about some of the characters because as much as Shuri like obviously was at the end of the day like the main character, like she was the Black Panther of Black Panther 2, like
Yeah,
no one really felt like the main character.
it was like an ensemble movie for
Yeah,
sure.
I
Yeah,
mean I think towards the end when she actually becomes Black Panther, like it really focuses really hard on her. But before then, so Angela Bassett's character, say her name a lot because she deserves an Oscar, man. Like she's great. But anyway, I like she carries so much of it. Like she does such a great job, and like I agree. I had that thought too. I think that was probably in the original story as well, and they kept it. And which makes sense. But I thought, I'm like, damn, this movie's so sad. Like they added like another huge death on top of that. I was like, that's what got me the most. So I really didn't think they'd double down that hard on like how dark and heavy.
It's so like raw. It's such a raw death too.
Yeah.
Like she literally Namor drowns her. Like that's drowning is such an intimate death, and I can't quite explain why, but it is like it's a hard death to swallow in a way. Like I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Just seeing the like body floating in the water, you're like,
Yeah.
gosh,
Yeah. And
Lord.
like 100%, I was like, oh, they're gonna revive her, and obviously they did
Uh-huh.
reread. But I'm like, wait, what? Like I actually, like, oh my god, like I really, it was hard for me to believe that they like did that, like within
Yeah,
the context of what this film has become, since Chadwick Boseman's death and how much grieving was already in it. And I mean, they were like, we're gonna do more, and that's
yeah.
fair. But I was surprised. I was surprised they.
And so this also another thing that you had theorized that was less of a theory and felt more like common sense was that Ramonda would be Queen and Ramonda would be the one leading Wakanda when this movie opened up and not Shuri. And that's true. But what surprises me and another thing that I did not would not have in a million years have guessed would happen at the end of this movie is there seems to be an indication that Shuri will continue being the Black Panther of Wakanda, but that she has relinquished she brokered a peace treaty with Namor and Talokan, and then was like, "Okay, I'm done leading. That's it." And is now Black Panther, and the implication is that M'Baku is going to take over as like the ruler of Wakanda, which they did some legwork in the movie to set up the idea that he would actually be a good king. Because the first movie, like, does a lot of legwork to prove, oh, he's not a bad guy. And this movie does the rest of the legwork to say, not only is he not a bad guy, he might actually be a good leader. And I don't know, I really liked his role in this movie. It felt like they weren't. I don't know how quite to describe it. Like he didn't have too much of an active role in the actual plot per se.
Yeah.
Um, it did kind of feel like he was they weren't expecting how much people were going to like him in the first one and then felt like they had to find ways to fit him into the second one, which I'm okay with. Like there's always characters like that. I think Everett Ross is like that to a lesser extent. It's not like people were clamoring for more Ross in the way they were clamoring for more M'Baku, but like I do think that this idea of him becoming the ruler of Wakanda with Shuri as the Black Panther going forward is a very interesting dynamic. And I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I did not think Angela Bassett would die, so it's
Yeah,
really, but it's hard to say because at least from my perspective, like where this franchise or like world goes from here is who knows, like at all,
yeah,
and so especially because you have Shuri kind of going one direction. I mean, we don't really know what she's doing, but not being queen, and then Mbaku coming in. I don't, and I know there's like a lot of, I don't know, a lot of there's supposedly multiple like spin-offs in that like Disney Plus. So maybe a lot of the legwork going forward is through like spin-off type things. I
yeah,
just it is sort of like okay, but yeah, I just can't predict where they're going with that. But I do, I mean, Mbaku and Winston Duke, like, very likable. Like, I
yeah.
agree with you. Like, people really like him for, like, reason. And there was so little comparatively, like, um, comedic relief in
Oh,
this film.
I
I,
had no idea where you were
I
going with that. I was
know,
like,
I
I
know.
could jump in and help. I have
Well,
no
I
clue
was
what
trying
to
to say like humorous relief. I'm like, that's not a phrase, but
say.
I mean, Marvel. A lot of people have the criticism that Marvel's like too jokey, especially some movies that's like Ant Man. Like, come on, but like there was some in this movie, but it was, I mean, relatively little. Like, and
Yeah,
he was always kind of able to do that really effortlessly without like making a joke out of things, because
yeah,
this movie's not one to like be
no,
like making a joke about what's going on. But yeah, he is just very likable, and I think that could be part but where does that go story wise? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the spin-offs. We do know that there's at least two Disney Plus projects supposedly in some very early stage of development that are both going to take place in, around, or about Wakanda and like the Black Panther movie characters. Um, the rumor has been that there's one that's going to be about Wakanda itself, and there's going to be one specifically about like Okoye. Uh, you know, we don't really know. There's been no official announcements. Nate Moore, the executive producer, and no, not a co-writer, but the executive producer and one of the head creatives in both Black Panther movies, has confirmed that a Wakanda Disney Plus project is in development and that it's like very early stages. Um, but yeah, it's one of those where when you look at Marvel's upcoming slate of stuff, it's like where does you would assume they're going to make a Black Panther 3 just based on the success of the first. I mean, the second one has only been out for one weekend and I already feel like they're going to make a third one. Whether Ryan Coogler is involved or not is still in the air, but by the time they make that third one, I feel like both of these Disney Plus projects are going to be out. We're going to be post multiverse saga. It's just like unless they slide it into phase 6, we're still years away from a Black Panther 3. So by the time that happens, like I feel like most of the storylines they set up in Black Panther Wakanda Forever are going to play out elsewhere, whether that be the spinoff, whether that be in crossover projects. So I think it's hard to decide what Black Panther 3 is based on this movie because I think by the time they make Black Panther 3, the MCU as a whole is going to be a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, if we're talking about Black Panther 3 before we continue going down this list, we can talk about that mid-credit scene. Um, since I feel like we've arrived to that organically. That was something I heard a rumor on a long time ago and then forgot about that rumor completely and then watched the movie and then post credit scene happened and both times I just cried like a little baby, truthfully. I can't something about kids and siblings and like aunts and uncle. I don't know what it something about that just like really hit for me and I just started sobbing both times. Um but guys, there's a little T'Challa. Um, T'Challa and Nakia had a kid, and his name is also T'Challa, which is adorable. Um, Mary, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, that I also like that was a big rumor that got leaked a while ago, and it was like at the
Yeah,
time big, and I kind of forgot. I mean, I knew, but by the time I was seeing the movie, people like you and not you, but like had seen it early and like talked about it. So I knew that's what the mid credit scene was. So I was like waiting for it casually. Um, I was that person at the end of the movie that was like leaving because I knew there wasn't a post credit scene.
yeah, I did that in my second viewing.
Yeah, and I'm always like, these people think I'm an idiot, but I'm the
Mhm.
same, you know. But yeah, I mean, very emotional. We can talk about it. After I say my thoughts, but I don't fully understand how it makes sense. But that's what we can talk about. But I mean, very emotional, symbolic, like heartbreaking, but also heartwarming moment. And I think a lot of that was the way they kind of talked about how T'Challa had like prepared them for his death and like all this stuff. Like it reminds you of like the real world situation even more. Like
Yeah, especially
people know,
there's that scene, that moment with Shuri in the movie where she says like he suffered in silence. Like the fact that they fully did not shy away from what really happened in real life.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I felt like the mid credit scene like really, for me at least, like brought a lot of that like not fourth wall breaking, but you get it a little bit feeling, which is very very sad. But I don't know. I mean, presumably it means going forward there could be another T'Challa as a Black Panther or something. Like obviously he is more or less kind of the heir to the throne. I mean, the throne's somewhere. But like, I mean, but I mean, and you, as you mentioned, like by the time we get to like a Black Panther 3, we could be past Secret Wars, and past Secret Wars, like, yeah, anything's game, like, of what
Yeah,
they
and
universes.
especially like if they introduce T'Challa now, and T'Challa is 6 years old, uh, canonically, that is what I've heard from creatives and whatnot. Is he is 6 years old in this movie? So if he's six now, and then a couple more years of movies go by, like by the time they make Black Panther 3, he'll be hypothetically they could just have him be like a teenager, and you could just do like a teenage T'Challa movie if you really wanted to. Um, I can already feel, again, this is a church video, so there's breakdowns, so people want my opinions and ideas and thoughts. Um, my theory is that after the multiverse saga, if they continue with this format of the MCU, that the next saga is going to be the mutant saga. Like I think they're just going to go all in on the X-Men, especially after like yada yada yada. And I think if that's the case and they're making a Black Panther 3 in what is called the Mutant Saga, I think people are really going to be on that Storm train. Um, because for the folks at home, in the comics, T'Challa, the Chadwick's T'Challa, and Storm in the comics have a romantic relationship. They get married. It's not just they get married. It's not just a romantic relationship. Like they have a thing. She's like Queen of Wakanda for a little bit. They never have a kid. However, there's an animated film called Next Avengers: Heroes of Tomorrow. I love it. Please watch it. It's one of my all-time fave animated Marvel movies. It's real good. And in that movie, they do have a kid. It takes place in an alternate universe where Storm and Black Panther have a kid. His name is Azari, and he is the new Black Panther, but he also inherits his mother's electricity powers. He can't control the weather, but he has like organically he can emit electricity, like Electro. And so it's cool because then you have a Black Panther with electric powers, and it's pretty neat. And I do think that if they get that far and they wanted to introduce Storm, like I don't know, Namor's a mutant in this movie. They can just be like, "Hey, T'Challa's kid. Turns out he hit puberty. He's a mutant. He has electric powers. Are there any other mutants out there who could mentor this kid?" What Storm? Anyway,
I
um,
also see, and that's actually, I like your idea kind of better, but kind of, I mean, but what was in my head is post Secret Wars, like, I think they can literally like reform the universe. So wait,
yeah,
like baby T'Challa could very easily be full on adult T'Challa, or it's a different universe version, but basically the same, And so
yeah,
that could kind of fill in for if they wanted to do that, the romantic relationship between Storm and T'Challa, because he'd be appropriately aged
that's
at
also
some point.
yeah,
But yeah, and so that's where I always default to, like Phase 7 and beyond
yeah.
is
And honestly, if they go with that, they wouldn't. They could do T'Challa and Storm having a relationship without betraying the T'Challa and Nakia relationship because it's a different T'Challa. So you can still say like, okay, T'Challa and Nakia were faithful. There was no like intense love triangle there or anything. It's just their kid ended up with Storm, which is
yeah.
like a whole, that's also a good point.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things will kind of more or less be reset post Secret Wars. That's my take. Whatever.
You're probably right.
And so because they're gonna want to tell a lot of, like you said, if they go all in on sort of the X-Men story, like they're gonna want to tell a lot of classic stories that they've kind of like moved through, without them by
Yeah,
necessity. So, but that is interesting too, because to the extent they do that, and yet we're getting like potentially a Black Panther 3, but
yeah.
sort of reset, that would be interesting.
I
But
just feel like they're not going to want to stop making Black Panther movies after this just for financial reasons. And
yeah,
I think that if they were to make another one, they wouldn't want to, in the same way that Deadpool 3 is not part of the same universe anymore, but they're still marketing it as Deadpool 3 because money and people watch the first two and like the first two, and like casual viewers don't know, per se, everything that's going on. I feel like it would be similar with Black Panther, even if they were like resetting the universe. I think that they would still kind of market it as like this is the third
yeah,
one.
I think so too. I mean, you're
Uh,
not going to just call it Black Panther again to see if people.
yeah.
Yeah.
um. Yeah. So I did like that. I'm glad we broke that down. Next on your list of theories. You had jokingly said that. So I had posed the question to you: if there's no more heart-shaped herb.
Okay, I thought about this one a lot. Obviously, it was not in a weird cave with babbling brook. However,
No, here's the thing: you were actually like half right.
I know, but like
Which is
I
why I was
also
laughing when you were saying this during Theory Thursday. I was like, the one Shuri finds is it. She makes one, but the one that created like Namor and everything, that was literally like a random singular heart-shaped herb with the light shining down upon it, and I was like, you nailed it. It was funny.
yeah. And to be fair, I don't know. Can you? Is yours echoing? Was it just me?
I can hear you fine. Is there a weird?
No, I think we're good now. I I did. I don't think it made it onto the official Mary's theories list, but I did also think, and maybe I don't know if you wrote it down, but I know I talked about it because I knew Namor was a mutant or something different, and obviously, are they called Talokanians? That's such a mouthful. But
Tala Talakanil with like yeah. So it's Talakan and then il at the end.
okay, Talokanian. Better than
Yeah, it's
yeah.
less syllables for
Yeah,
sure.
and they were obviously not quite the same as regular humans either. So I kind of had thought like somehow something related to them could relate to the art taper. So I was also in my head at least slightly right on that too. But yeah,
You were pretty close. We're gonna get into. We're gonna break down all the new characters and cultures and stuff because I have written about it and know like a somewhat decent amount. Um, aha! Another one of your theories was that Namor's name in the MCU would come from something taken from him at a young age. Guess what? It's his mom, and then their homeland. You also sort of nailed that.
yeah, it was more than just the. I mean, yeah, the mom. We didn't really see his dad. But yeah, I mean, it's still Disney at the end of the day. Parents gonna die. Obviously, they killed
Gotta
Angel
die.
too. Like they're like fuck, man. Like they all
Disney kills parents. That's
have.
like their whole thing.
Yeah. So, but I mean, they didn't all hate him because he wasn't blue. Also, are they only blue underwater or
Yes.
above?
Above water. Yeah, so it's an oxygen thing, I believe. I think that's the idea is that when they're above water they have slightly less oxygen, so their skin turns blue.
That's fair. I didn't notice that until like we were in the flashback slash the story of
Oh
Namor.
really?
When the mom was like giving birth and she like wasn't blue anymore underwater, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Like I was really freaked out. Not freaked out, but just super confused for a while. And I
To be
think,
fair, I don't think they really highlight it until that scene.
yeah, they didn't really talk about
Well, no,
it.
because that's not true. He had already no, because he gives the flashback before he shows Shuri like Talakan and like all of the people there. So like you see that flashback, and then he shows like the city, and you see no one down there is blue, and you're like, oh okay, cool, cool, cool. So let me. We're talking about this, so let me interject with Namor's comic book origin. For those who have seen the movie and are watching this, and if you're watching this and haven't seen the movie, what are you doing? Turn it off. Go watch the movie. Anyway,
34 minutes into it, yeah.
Namor in this movie, personality wise and like vibe wise, is very similar to the comics. Like I always like to joke that he's a sexy asshole in the comics, and I was hoping that's what he would be in the movie, and that's what he was in the movie, and that's true. He's brash. You know, a lot of people like to say he's Marvel's Aquaman. That's not true because he's not heroic in the way that Aquaman is. He is very much the leader of a nation who is willing to do anything for that nation, and that includes killing a teenage girl if he needs to. Like he will do anything. It doesn't care. He will attack Wakanda, whatever. His people are his priority. The sea is his priority. And if he's got to be a bit of a jerk to get that done, he's going to be a jerk. He's not like a superhero per se. People associate him with like the Invaders and Captain America and stuff, and they're like, well, he was on a superhero team. He only joined that team because he felt like the Nazis were a threat to his nation. He wasn't joining the team because he was like, ooh, tights, that seems fun. No, that's not what he was doing. It's never been his character. So that is very accurate. in the movie. He has always been more of an anti-hero than like a straight up hero, per se. This movie changes his origin almost entirely, though, and as well as the origin of in the movie Talocan, but in the comics Atlantis. In this movie, they pose the idea that his civilization is the same age as him. That like it's been around for about 500 years. That he's the first son of Talocan, and that he was born there, and that he is a mutant because his mother took the heart-shaped herb, yada yada yada. You guys watch the film. In the comics, that is not the case. Atlantis has already existed for however long before he's born. Um, he is only royalty because his mother is the princess when he is born. He's a mutant because he is half Atlantean, half human. That is similar to Aquaman. Namor did it first. Please don't get that twisted. Namor existed before Aquaman. This is a very important topic to me. Um, his mother was the princess of Atlantis. His dad was a sailor that she was like sent to infiltrate the ship to scare him away, but instead she fell in love with him and they made a baby, and that baby was Namor. Um, Namor ends up becoming the prince of Atlantis. Eventually, he becomes the ruler of Atlantis. He is very white in the comics. His dad is a white dude from the United States, and that's the skin that he gets. Yeah, so it's not the way it plays out in the movie. It's a lot better in the movie, if I'm being honest. In my personal opinion, I think it's a lot more interesting. I think it's a lot more rich. Um, yeah, so it is different, and that goes for Namora and Atuma as well. They're very different in the comics than they are in the movie, but we can get to that in a second. Yeah, and the name Namor in the comics as well. That's the last point I was trying to remember. In the movie, they explain that it comes from a Spanish saying that basically means like a child without love or whatever, because he has no love for the surface world. In the comics, they explain that Namor is actually the Atlantean term for avenging sun. And so they name him Avenging Sun because dramatics and whatnot. Obviously they were a lot more creative with that in the movie as well. He is also not known as the feathered serpent god in the comics because that makes no sense when he's again white as hell and not at all related to Mexican culture or anything like that. Yeah, so that's my little bit on Namor. They changed it. He's also not like 500 years old in the comics. He was born in like the 40s or the 20s or 30s, and he aged fairly normally. At first, I don't think they implemented the slower aging process until it made more sense for the comics. Um, but yeah, so that's Namor in the comics. Same guy, same personality, same vibe, but very different origin. Um, so Mary was kind of close with the name. All that to say that. Mary's other theory that she mentioned was that his name was because he's not blue and they all hate him, which is a very sad Rudolph origin, and that is not what happened.
But it was a good try. The parent, yeah. My main thing was the parents, to be fair. So, um, yeah. But I did. I mean, I think most people who watch this movie come away like really liking this character.
Yeah.
Really liking Pinochueta. Like he was just cool. Like I mean, I really was. My like retrospective pitch that obviously can never happen. But is that this movie would have been a mashup between like a Namor centered origin and then the Black Panther first film, and so like both their second films that collided into this because I think we would have gotten the time spent to like build up Namor. We would have already had it, in a different film, and then they could have just spent more time at it. But what was my point for that? He's really cool. Awesome character introduction. To your point, he's not generally someone who's gonna go forth and join a bunch of teams, and people probably want that or think that. Just that's how Marvel works often. Um, do you think? I'll ask you a question. Do you think they're gonna mess with that kind of vibe going forward in the MCU? No.
No, I think that. I mean, obviously he's gonna show up again. You don't introduce a character like this and not have him show up. And his last scene in the movie is literally him declaring that he's gonna show up again, basically. So yeah. Um. No, I think that they might find a way to make him join a team or like have him team up with the Avengers in like Secret Wars or something. But it'll be like within the context of he has to team up with the Avengers for the sake of Talocan. Like I don't think they're gonna have him just go in the comics. Namora was more the one who was like, actually, screw my life underwater. I'm just gonna go live on land and like make a bunch of besties and like do my own thing. That was a lot more her thing. Namor has always been like, nah, Atlantis 100% in the comics. So no, I don't think so, and I feel like it would be a bit of a betrayal of Ryan Coogler's work with the character in this movie if they suddenly had him be like, oh, and now I'm gonna go join the Defenders and like team up with Doctor Strange and like I do think that he's gonna end up in a team at some point. I just think they're gonna have to find a way to make it make sense in the context of who we met in this movie. I don't think they're gonna just have him willy nilly be like, oh, and then we like recruit Nick Fury recruits Namor and he's like joins the Avengers for the greater good. Like I think it's gonna have to be someone cutting a deal with him, or it's gonna have to be there's an imminent threat to Talocan, and if he doesn't team up with these other heroes to figure something out, like Talocan will die with everyone else. Like I think that's gonna be the vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to see like the very anti-hero side of him. I think that's so different than most, main comic book characters we see. Even like Deadpool is an anti-hero, but like yeah, everyone loves him. So I like the idea of like having this like character people like, but they have to be like, oh shit, like he's a dick. I do want them to lean into that as well. And they did here, but it was his first meeting. I feel like they could have done more, but they could have done less as well. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to, you know, like
Yeah.
encapsulate.
Well,
Back to my pitch. This was a mashup of sequels. You could have had him more a little nicer in the first, just like build him as a hero, and then like this movie, you just dick, anti-hero. Like, go on.
yeah. Well, and again, it comes down to me to like if you didn't also have to reconcile the change in guard in terms of like Black Panther and stuff in this movie, then you have more time for like Namor being Namor, but you lose some of that when you have to spend time on other things and then yeah, yeah, ba. Um I'll say really quick just what we're breaking down, and then we can move away from Telecan and stuff because I do think all of that's beautiful and whatnot. So like I just said, Namora. I'm gonna talk about Namora and Atuma really quick because I think it's interesting what they did with those characters. Namora in the comics is Namor's cousin. I watched it twice. I don't remember them explicitly stating that in the movie. Um, the reason Shishida is actually not born with the name Namora. Everyone is like, that's such a crazy thing to do. No, her name is like Aquaria something something something. And she's Namor's cousin. And in honor of Namor, who is already pretty popular by the time she's born, they end up her parents rename her after Namor at when she's like a little bit older to Namora, which if Namor is the Atlantean term for avenging son, Namora is the Atlantean term for avenging daughter. And she ends up becoming essentially like Namor's equal. Like he ends up gaining respect. Again, the original comics in which she showed up were written in like the 30s and 40s. Namor is one of the first Marvel characters ever created, so his supporting cast is like among the very first supporting cast Marvel ever created. Um, Namor did not want to hang out with her because she was a woman, and then it turns out she's like the only one in Atlantis who could match his strength and wit and all of this stuff. So he's like, "Oh, you're smart and strong. Cool, we can hang out now." And then they start hanging out, and for a while she was like his sidekick is like the way they portrayed her in the comics. It was like every adventure he went on she was there, like she was always just like there to help Namor and go on adventures with him and yada yada yada. And then later they gave her her own comic series where she was like, peace, I'm out of here. And she just went to the surface world and had like her own adventures. She like almost married Craven the Hunter at one point. She stopped fascism. She like did all these crazy things, and then she died, and she was dead for like decades. And they had this whole weird arc where she had a daughter, who wasn't actually a daughter; she was secretly a clone, named Namorita. And then Namorita died in Civil War, and around the time Namorita died in Civil War, uh, Namora was her body was discovered and revived by Doctor Doom, and now she's like back in the comics. But in the comics, she is also not blue. She has the same. Her parents. Not only is she Namor's cousin, they have like the same origin, except they flip the parents. Her mom is human and her dad is Atlantean, and she also has white skin, as opposed to being blue. And in the movie, they were just like, nah, she's blue. She's not Namor's equal. She's kind of just like a really skilled Tao Kanil, and she's like his right hand. But an interesting thing they did with her was they had her question him at the end, which I liked because I feel like that was a spark of, oh, Namora like independence and not just a person who is here. On the flippity side of that, and this will be the end of this rant, Atuma is completely different than he is in the comics. I've said this a few times. I wrote a few articles on it. Everyone who's watching this, go read them. In the comics, Atuma is to Namor what M'Baku is to T'Challa. Like, he is born of the Skarka tribe, which is essentially the Atlantis version of the Jabari. Um, they're like a barbaric tribe that is forced to live on the outskirts of Atlantis because they don't like the ruling class in Atlantis. And there's like a prophecy in this tribe that one of them will be born and be this like perfect warrior who will take over Atlantis by force, and the Skarka will like rule Atlantis one day. And Atuma has a really troubled childhood. His dad is like chieftain, and then his dad is murdered, and it's like this whole thing. This is big falling out. He hates Atlantis. He hates Namor, and Namor and Atlantis hate him and the Skarka. And there's just this like never-ending battle between him and Namor. He's Namor's arch nemesis in the comics. He's always trying to conquer Atlantis. That's his whole thing. He's always got these crazy schemes, and he's like teaming up with like Kang the Conqueror and Doctor Doom and all these other big hitters who he's like, "You're gonna give me more power, and I'll rule Atlantis," and he never does. He did like once for a little bit, and he was bad at it, and then Namor took it back. So that's his whole thing. But in this movie, he's kind of just like Namor's right hand man. He's just like the big muscly general guy of the army, and he has some cool scenes, and he has a really cool design. But he's like a totally different character. Um, so just throwing that out there for breakdown purposes. Um, let's talk about Riri Williams, because your next few theories you got right, but they're also based on rumors you already knew, which is that Riri becomes involved via building a vibranium detector. Oh, that's another thing. Vibranium is not in Atlantis in the comics. They added that for the movie. That
Yeah.
connection.
And quickly back to your point, I also think what they did with Namor in this film, and I guess in the Marvel Cinematic Universe generally, is like super cool in general. Like they made it so much more interesting than like
Yeah.
it could have been or would have been had they been more comic accurate. And they, I don't know, they did a really great job of that. Obviously, and it fits a lot of themes of Wakanda Forever as well, so that was helpful with this movie. But just in general, like it was just much more telling. It makes a little bit. I don't know if it makes more sense than just Atlantis would, but like I don't know. There's just something. I think the word you used was like rich, and I think that's a good word. It was done very very well. Yeah, that's just a quality adversarial character that they just built into this movie. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, yeah. What was your point? Riri. Okay, yes. I do have a concern. My okay. I love the character, and I really love Dominic Thorne at it. Like she was a very likable like character, and she was like immediately like not like deferential to like Wakandan royalty, and I really liked that. Like she was like, get out of my dorm. Um, my issue with the whole thing is she built that, someone else took it and put it in like, some giant machine whatever government was using it. And that's like the whole nexus of why Namor's in this film, why Namor does anything, and it's like, how is that like? Obviously, he wants to kill her because she knows how to do it. But someone took it and put it in a machine. They know how to do it. They know whatever plans were made. Like it was a class project. Like she wrote it down.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was like a little weak, like reasoning for the whole thing, which is a little frustrating. I did really like the character. I also felt though like I wish she was in it less. I thought she was one of the things that took away from was happening in Wakanda otherwise, or even with now. I don't know. I really, it's not that I didn't like the character. I'm excited for the series. I wish she just didn't take up as much screen time in this. She did. It kind of just felt. I don't know. It didn't. I just. I don't know. Because there was always constantly someone who wasn't from Wakanda, like within like that main circle of people we were following and like really cared about. And not that she wasn't great, but she just didn't fit with them as well. And it's like I would rather kind of like watch them do their own thing,
Yeah.
brief like that. I don't know. It was just that's yeah.
And this is me reaching too. I agree with I also really like Riri, and I also think that Dominique Thorne is great, and it was cool to like see her do her thing, and I brought a lot. You could tell that Dominique Thorne was like having fun with it too, and that brought me a lot of joy. I do also like see your point, and I agree with it too. This goes back to me once again wondering like what of this movie is from the original version of this movie and what isn't, because I think the second time I watched this movie, I appreciated Riri's role thematically more. Especially when you brought up earlier the sequence with Killmonger and Shuri being really, really good, and everything he says to her about like, don't take that away from your mom. Like she sacrificed her life to save this like this girl from, as he puts it, the lost tribe and all that sort of stuff. But I do think that the first Black Panther ends with T'Challa being like, we are opening up our resources to the world. We're opening up our resources to like our culture and our people and all this stuff. And I think that part of me wonders if at some point Riri was supposed to be part of this outreach center that he set up,
Yeah.
or be symbolic of that and what he was trying to do there. And I think that Riri being in this movie and the Wakandans taking Riri in as wholeheartedly as they do is an extension of what T'Challa was fighting for at the end of the first movie, and like what Killmonger and his whole conflict was, and this idea that the way they're fighting for Riri, they never would have fought for Riri that way, like pre the events of the first movie. Um, which I liked. I didn't pick up on that as much until the second one, where I was like, oh, okay, this is them trying to be better. Like I did like that, but I also see your point in that she was in it a lot, and what part of that is clearly because like Ryan Coogler and Marvel Studios are giving her own show, and they really wanted to set it up here. But I would argue that uh, Everett Ross and Vel
Oh
are
yeah.
slightly less important than
Yeah.
Riri.
I will say, I mean, I've only seen it once, and usually the second and then third time I see something, I have like potentially very different opinions on certain things. So like, yeah, it's very fair that I could see it again. I think if I see it again, or when I see it again, the like feeling of rushness isn't gonna bother me as much because I like everything else is so good. So I'm just gonna be able to like,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, okay, yeah. So Ross and yeah, I the little side plot, if you will, of like the U.S. government being fucking idiots. Like I don't, I don't know what they're doing. Let's attack Wakanda. Good God. But like, okay, I don't dislike that plot. I mean, but they did give too much time to it, more so with the Val at Ross thing, and I
That
just
bothers me more than Ross. Let me throw that out there right now. Like,
100%. Yeah.
I almost Ross's purpose in the movie makes so much more sense to me than Vel.
Oh yeah, he has a purpose
Just
though. Like, and
he
that's the
does
thing.
have a purpose, yeah.
People will say like, oh, Val was like. a lot of people don't think she needed to be it, and that's fair. And she didn't. But people are like, oh, Thunderbolt set up. I'm like, nothing about this movie set up Thunderbolts though. Like more so
Yeah.
than it had to have like would if
It
it was.
just further sets Val up as like you're not supposed to like her. Like she's
All it
clearly
does is say she's the CIA director,
yeah.
has a strip of blue hair, and it's a strange
She's a
world.
CIA director, and she like that line where he's like, "Could you imagine what we would be doing if like we were the only ones with vibranium?" She's like, "I dream of it every night." That's like the most important piece of dialogue she has in the movie because it's them setting her up as like terrible.
No, but you could do that anywhere else. But
Yeah.
to literally put her in this
Oh,
movie,
it didn't need to be in this
or
movie.
like
Yeah.
maybe a line that if you know like what's coming,
Yeah.
like you can connect it. But like otherwise, like nothing about Thunderbolts other than if you know Thunderbolts is coming and she's involved, which you know she's in the whole little lineup. Like nothing. Like she just didn't bring anything to it. I don't know.
And
Yeah. I mean, what?
I'm throwing this out there too. I've talked about it a lot in our Slack chat actually, and I've tweeted about it like once or twice. Val made more sense to me as a character in the MCU when I thought that she was being set up to replace like Thaddeus Ross, like Thunderbolt Ross. Um because okay, so I really thought for a minute there that they were like, we know that William Hurt is not in good health. Like we know that they did because they did. They knew that he wasn't in good health. They knew that he probably was going to pass soon. And they knew that I thought they knew, okay, we're going to lose Thaddeus Ross, but there's no point in recasting this character. Like, we didn't even recast T'Challa, so why would we recast, like, Thunderbolt Ross, right? And so my thought was they wanted to find a different character who they could introduce and sort of like phase out Ross and phase in a different character to take his place in the stories where he would be playing a major role, like Thunderbolts or New World Order, or even this movie, like something along those lines. And I thought that they were using Val as like she is sliding into that Thunderbolt Ross spot in the movies. But then, before this movie comes out, they announce, no, we're recasting Thunderbolt Ross with Harrison Ford, of all people, and he's going to be in like two different movies and have like a big role in New World Order and yada, yada, yada. And now that I know that, and I know that they're not using her in the Thunderbolt Ross role, instead they've gone and cast one of the most famous men to ever live as this character. I'm like, now you're them hyping you up and making you a big part of this movie makes less sense to me because if I thought that they were using your role in this to set you up as like the new big American government force in the next like several movies, then it makes slightly more sense to me why they're doing that. But now I'm like, what? Like now you feel less important because now I know that Thunderbolt Ross is still out there doing his thing.
Yeah, and I mean, what we've seen from her before obviously is very little, but it's her recruiting people, and that's all we've
Yeah.
seen. And so I kind of like half expected, like, I mean, had there been another post-credit scene or what, at some point, like she would do that with, I don't know who would make the best sense in this movie, but like, do that.
It seemed like she might do that with Riri. Like she'd be like, "Oh, there's
Yeah,
this like I want my Iron Man. Like
yeah,
let me recruit this kid."
exactly.
Yeah,
And then the whole like ex marriage, they were ex
yeah, like
spouse.
that was super random. Like I don't understand.
And like people were like in my theater. I remember when whenever they first say the line that like you realize that that's what they are. I mean, there was like one random dude going, "Oh," and I was just like, "Yeah, what's the point, man?"
I will
Like,
say there was a weird amount of reaction to that in my theater, but it was like delayed. Like they said the line, and then 2 minutes later, people were like, "Wait,
how would
what?" There was one person behind me who
like
literally went, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Yeah, they don't. Yeah,
it just is, and honestly, that made it take more time too, because then they had that whole dynamic before she, arrests him. She could have just arrested him because she's about, the boss and
yeah."
like whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people.
And I understand Ross's role in this movie as like if they're gonna be coming to the United States and causing a ruckus in Cambridge, like having someone in the United States government who can downplay your activity there, that makes sense. Like I totally get that. That actually makes sense within the story to me. Um, so that was fine. I will also say that one of your theories technically ended up being incorrect, but also I think by the end of the movie is correct, like sort of correct. And that you said you felt like in this movie Everett K. Ross was going to have during the blip like left the government and he was going to be
Oh,
like
no,
on
but then
the
at
run.
the end, like he's not in it. Yeah, no. So
Yeah,
take it. I was more basing that off of what I pictured him in doing in Secret Invasion, so that kind of works.
it does kind of work because now by the time Secret Invasion happens, he is not going to be part of the government. He got arrested and then he escaped. Um, so yeah, that's a whole thing. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be a long episode because there's so much to talk about. There's a lot in this movie. Um, we kind of skipped over Riri. I will just say I like Riri a lot. We gave our opinions. Riri in this movie is pretty comic accurate in like a lot of ways, right down to the idea of like her having a secret hideaway in MIT and then people discovering it and trying to she has to like fly away and yada yada yada. She does have a relationship with Shuri and the Wakandans, like a good friendship with them in the comics as well. She also helped them. It wasn't part of her origin story. They bumped that up, but like all that exists. They even had like in the comics, her dad dies before she's born, and then her stepdad dies later, and she has a close relationship with her mom, and she's from Chicago. All of that was hinted at in this movie. The biggest difference with Riri between the comics and the MCU is that they aged her up. In the comics, she's 15. She's a child. She's a child prodigy who becomes a teenage prodigy who becomes a teenage superhero. And in this, she's actually college age going to MIT. That's like the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Um,
If she was in, obviously at MIT, and maybe I already knew she was like 19, but I thought maybe she was just like a super child prodigy, like the 15-year-olds who were at MIT and stuff. But yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, that was the only, and I think that might have just been like they liked Dominic Thorne for the role, so they were like, we'll just age her up. Like I don't know if it was like a huge.
I saw some like random person on Twitter who I think thinks they're like a leaker. Maybe they are. I don't know. But like one of those people say something. I think it was today, like that the young Avengers are all going to be college aged. So if they're really just putting random college age people together, she would fit. But I mean, I know she's not, but like, who knows what Marvel Studios is doing with that? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Because I honestly, it would have been a little more like if Neymar was trying to kill a 15-year-old, it's not that different, but there is a different kind of level of like, oh,
Yeah, like if she was clearly a child,
yeah,
yeah, like she's young, but if she was clearly like a child, that would have been that would have been different. Yeah, I don't know, and I do I agree. I like Riri is great. There's some other Iron Man esque stuff in this movie. They introduced the concept of Midnight Angels, which is like newer in the Black Panther mythos, but has been, I think they introduced it in the comics in like 2017, 2016, like somewhere in there. Um, that was the whole point of introducing Anika in this movie, Michaela Cole's character. In the comics, her and the Midnight Angels are also introduced at the same time. But her and Ao, who are in a relationship in the comics and are also still in a relationship in the MCU, they have like this whole crazy arc where they like okay, this is a lot of me ranting just because I did some research on this. Okoye's arc in this movie is actually Anika's arc in the comics, which is funny because like Anika is in the movie, but like they gave it to Okoye because Okoye is the one that we have a relationship with. But in the comics, Anika ends up killing. It's a different reason, but she ends up on trial in front of Queen Ramonda, um, because she kills a chieftain within Wakanda who's being abusive towards the women in his tribe. So she kills him to save the women. And Ramonda is like, you can't do that. No matter your reason, you can't just go kill a chieftain. That's crazy. So she strips her of her spot in the Dora Milaje. And Anika's like, well, that kind of sucks. And Ao, who she's in a relationship with, is like, I don't agree with this ruling, so I'm also gonna quit the Dora, and I'm gonna go like help my girl. And they end up and they go to like the tribe where the chieftain was, and they overthrow all of the abusive dudes. They end up going and overthrowing the Jabari. Like they literally take over the Jabari because at this point M'Baku's like not around. There's this different guy who goes by White Gorilla, and they literally kill him. Like Anika and Ao murder him because he sucks, and they take over the Jabari lands and they institute democracy in the Jabari lands, and it works. The democracy works, and T'Challa feels real threatened by this. So he like starts some crap with them. He's like, "Hey, could you not do that because you're kind of like upending this whole thing that we got going on here?" And they're like, "We want a better Wakanda." And he's like, "I feel like Wakanda's pretty good." And they're like, "Nah." And then they team up with a totally different rebellion within Wakanda called the People. And guess what? Turns out the people are kind of terrorists, and they don't like, they're like, we want a better Wakanda, but then they just murder innocent people, and it's like, well, pick and choose, man. Like, pick a lane. And so then Ao and Anika as Midnight Angels because they steal the Midnight Angel. I totally skipped that part. Sorry, guys. Uh, when they defect from the Dora, they steal the Midnight Angel armor, and that's how they like overthrow everybody. It's like a prototype at that point, and they're using the prototypes, and they become the Midnight Angels. Um, Long story short, this arc ends with them convincing T'Challa that Wakanda needs a democracy, and he ends up transforming the Wakandan government into a democracy, and he's still King T'Challa, but more so as like a figurehead in the same way that like the British royals are not really in charge of the government. And there's like this whole arc that happened in 2017. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote it. It was a whole thing, and that's what they pulled from in here. But they gave a lot of that to Okoye, and then made Anika like the tag along, and made them the Midnight Angels. But the Midnight Angel armor in the movie looks exactly like it does in the comics. It's actually like page to screen, like a one for one. It's pretty good. It's pretty accurate. It's good. However, that's like the whole point of Anika. I think Anika was in this movie specifically to set her up as a main character in one of the Disney Plus spinoffs, which I think is going to be a Midnight Angels spinoff.
And I kind of felt that. I mean, it was when it was towards the end, and Okoye was about to like actually, because obviously Shuri was building the Midnight Angel armor, and Okoye was just like making fun of it the whole time.
Yeah,
And so Shuri said the name of it. It was like this is here just to set something up, which is fine. But that was my one problem with the film is feeling like too much stuff happened. I don't. Not that it took up much time, but it did just seem kind of random in context. Like they're
yeah,
about to like go to
yeah,
farm or like Midnight Angel, like it just didn't seem. But yeah, to your point, like Anika didn't have like she was there, but she didn't do much.
yeah. And I don't feel like you cast someone like Michaela Colt for like a one movie role where she like barely does anything.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, for sure. I mean, they put her on screen like enough times that like they want us to know like who she is and that she's there, and that's. But to your point, didn't seem like she brought that much importance to the film, probably to a.
Yeah, and honestly, that whole like comic arc I just laid out, I feel like a lot of that is gonna be the Disney Plus spinoff.
Yeah,
And they're just gonna replace T'Challa's role with M'Baku, and it'll be like
almost makes it
that's
easier. I mean, to do that,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. I think that's what's gonna happen, and then Shuri's just gonna be like Black Panther with the Avengers or whatever by that point, and it'll be like a whole fun thing. Let's go through more of your Namor. You said Namor be a mutant. That was correct. We got another instance of the word mutant said aloud in the MCU. Um, you also said there'd be an LGBTQ plus relationship that happened.
Yeah, okay. I have it. The fact that this movie has been banned in countries for that is
I know.
fucking nuts. I mean, it's always stupid. It's
Like head
always
kiss
stupid,
in
but
a
this is
sentence.
this is if everyone was just like if Marvel called up China, I don't know how they do that, and just said no, they're just friends. How they interact, they'd be like cool, like
They're
nothing.
real good friends.
Yeah, it's
Wakanda, when they're really good friends, they kiss each other on the forehead and call each other my love, and that's it.
not that big. I can see it.
that, my friends. I feel like it's not that weird. Um, you said that Atuma might secretly be the main villain. That is not true.
It's true.
Um,
Well, it's true. That's not true. Yeah.
not true at all. You said Atuma might be loyal for the whole movie with seeds planted at the
You
end.
were really asking some leading questions. I didn't know
I
anything
did,
about
yeah.
it before that video.
Because you were like, I have no theories, and I was like, well, let me lead you to some theories.
Yeah, no. I mean, I do think I thought of that a little bit at the end, just that line of questioning we talked about. When Namora did question Namor and his Easter egg, because it kind of seemed like almost something Atuma could have done, and it was like kind of sowing the seeds of like he's a little disgruntled in his role, and I could see some disgruntlement.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting in the sense of like maybe the MCU puts Namora in like the Atuma role, and Atuma stays as like Namor's right hand man, general guy.
Or he's Namora's right hand man, general guy.
Yeah, that could be another thing. I have to believe that Marvel has at least some concept of like a Talocan like spinoff.
I
You
mean,
know?
surely. I mean, I I get. It's so weird that this film is like technically a solo film. Like it's just kind of nutty to like say out loud because it really did feel like this was Namor's like very dramatic and well done introduction to the MCU, but certainly not like its MCU story.
Yeah, during that final fight, I actually got really nervous when he got lit up with the fire because I was like, "Are they gonna kill him?" Like I was kind of because I like him a lot, and I've been waiting for him forever with the concept of like, oh, he's gonna be around for a while, and I was like, "Are they really gonna kill him in his first appearance?" I was so stressed.
I will say also another credit to this movie. Again, my only issue was that I felt like it was a bit just like jumpy at times, but like I truly, especially after they killed Angela Bassett's character, I was like, what are they gonna do? I was like, I don't know who's
Like
gonna
when
win.
they
Like I know
they
who's
impaled Shuri, and everyone was like, "Are they gonna kill Shuri too?" Like,
it was such like a obviously it's Black Panther 2 and it's Black Panther 2 in the context that we have it. There's no way Wakanda's gonna lose. But then again they killed Angela Bassett, which threw me off. And they built up Talo Kanil. Also just doesn't roll off the tongue yet. We'll get there. And Namor so much that I'm like, I don't see how Wakanda wins. There's like the way
they had
they
Namor say like 4 different times, like, "There's no way you can beat me." Like he said that.
yeah. And I mean it most movies don't end in truces, but most movies don't have a villain that's like a pretty big character in a universe otherwise. That's probably part of it. But yeah, I honestly, towards the end, I was like, I don't know who's gonna win this. Like, probably the protagonist, but like, I wouldn't know. I honestly, and I
The fight between Namor and Shuri was like way more. I think I already used this word earlier in this, but it was so much more raw than I thought. It was a lot less like fancy footwork and a lot more like just brutal. Yeah, like it was rough. It was rough. Which Namor and T'Challa have a long history rivalry in the comics as well, which usually ends with them being very brutal. It's like, here's a little fun fact for people who might not know this. In the first Black Panther movie, T'Challa says a line to Claw, the great Andy Serkis, where he says, "Every breath you take is a gift from me." Um, and he says that to Claw in the movie. That is a direct bit of dialogue from the comics. However, in the comics, he's not saying that to Claw. He says that to Namor during a fight that is very similarly aggressive to the one that Shuri and Namor get into in this movie, where it's very much like claw to face, like impalements, just bloody, like they're full on Wakandan Atlantis war in the comics. And that's like something that T'Challa says is every breath you take is a gift from me. That line just goes so hard. But yeah, there is like Wakanda versus Atlantis, Talocan, whatever you want to say. That like that's an established rivalry. That's something that they have fought each other on more than one occasion, and the MCU seems to be hinting that this is not the last time we've seen these two nations interact with each other. So that'll be really interesting to me. But yeah, that whole conflict was really really good. Um, I think that they did a good job of making their relationship feel organic, which I thought was good. And Namor and Shuri, I've seen a lot of talk online about people shipping them already. I did kind of listen. This is for all you Star Wars fans out there, especially on the second watch through. I see the Raylo vibes that you're talking about. I do. I see them. Do I think the MCU is going to go for it? No, because I don't think that it's as focused on this storyline as Star Wars was focused on Kylo Ren and Rey. However, I get it. I see it. I see you. I see you, people. Anyway, um, Mary, we could keep talking about this movie for like 2 more hours. There's a million other things, but is there anything else that you really like? You had thoughts on, or you have questions about, or you really are like we should dissect this for a second? There's no Doctor Doom.
There's no Doctor Doom. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
no Doctor Doom.
yeah, I the one there's this is kind of more of a broad thought on it,
No, go for it.
but like, and I'm sure people have talked about it, but I just don't see it just organically in my Twitter life, and I see a lot of shit on Twitter, so it's interesting how little talk I've seen of it. But like, this is a woman-led film, and like obviously we knew that going into it, and like because Shuri is Black Panther, like it literally is even in the title, and like it's fucking sick. Like I mean, it has. I first of all, I always loved the first Black Panther for several reasons, but one being there were so many like really strong, meaningful, powerful female characters, and then obviously in this film, like they take the reins, and I think because there was so much talk about everything else with the movie, which is totally fair. People didn't talk about it as much, which is so nice because the second you go, oh, there's a woman movie, like people get so
Yeah.
weird. But it is. Like it truly is. I mean, Namor's, doing his thing, but like, and I don't know, people just like accepted it this time because they were thinking about other things, I think, and not being gross in their brain, like other reasons. But like, it's awesome. And it's great characters and it's great representation, obviously, for a lot of different reasons in this movie across all the characters that they've introduced. But like, that's something I also really appreciate about this movie. And I don't see people talk about that much. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I I talked with one of my friends that I went to see it with about this as well, and I'm glad you brought it up because it is something that I've thought about, and they talked about this in the press junket. A question came up for Ryan Coogler that was not like ill intentioned, but it was sort of like, oh, what was it like? Like, did you purposefully decide this was gonna be like a woman movie, like that sort of question, right? Um, and him and Nate Moore answered it really beautifully, and that they basically just said like that's just how it happened, like or organically, because the way he described it, and these are not my words, these are like his words. Um, just when you watch that first movie, right? Like that first movie was a very masculine film. Like you have two dudes fighting. It's very like there's fire everywhere and muscle and testosterone, and that's just how it is. And you have like Kendrick Lamar doing the soundtrack, and it's just like it's a very like masculine, aggressive movie, and it which is fine. Like they handled it very well and delicately. Um, but then you look at all of the characters surrounding that movie, like you just said, right? They're all women. So then you take the man who's at the center of that, T'Challa, and he's gone. Like for circumstances out of our control, he is not here anymore. And naturally speaking, if the movie is about people reacting to that, like the other characters are the women. So then that just becomes the characters that this movie is focusing on. But they talked a lot about how like the feminine touch of this movie helped it a lot, and like these actors performing. And he was talking about that's why they asked Rihanna to do the music because Rihanna is a new mother, and Rihanna is like in a period of her life where she's experiencing a lot of the emotions that they were like trying to touch on in the movies. So they like asked her to do it. It got really sad really fast because they mentioned that Rihanna only did it because she wanted to do it like for Chadwick, and they started talking about how like even after death he was still like giving to the movie and helping improve it and stuff, and they all started crying. It was very sad. However, yes, it was like an organic on purpose thing
Yeah. And
that I really liked.
yeah, I truly like I love that and I appreciate that so much because it was just like these are our characters and this is the movie. You know that I mean, other movies should kind of be the same way, but you know, life. But I yeah, what I ooh the feminine touch part. I mean, when you have a movie like this that's so emotional, I mean, like the classic like feminine thing, like philosophy wise, like critique wise, not just like shitty dudes on the internet wise, is like handling emotions better, dealing with them, like exploring them. You know, so had you had a movie that didn't have the whatever it was, like
Yeah,
not be able to
I
do
think
that.
you meant that in the way that
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
yeah
That's what I mean. I didn't, and I'm yeah, I meant that in a. I understand that statement.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, because I mean, if you, yeah, yeah, you get it.
It's a very like motherly film in a lot of ways, and I think that that was and I do think that like he didn't bring up the fire thing, but like I made note in my head of like the first movie, there's a lot of fire and like destruction and all this stuff, and then there was in this one too, but so much of this movie is like water based, and then you have water as a symbol of like rebirth and like all this stuff, and I do think that you literally end up with these two Black Panther movies that thematically are like fire and water, which I think are really that is cool the way that ended up playing out. And I love. We didn't really talk about it. And we don't have to get into it like a ton, but I really did like Nakia's role in this. Like, and I liked her at. I like the way that no two characters reacted the same to the trauma of this movie. I guess is what I'm getting at. I like that it was like they all had their own way of responding to it and dealing with it, and I thought that was just really beautiful. And like seeing all these different perspectives on it and everything like that. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah. I yeah. I again, I really do think like on second watch, I will like literally enjoy it like a lot more. But I mean, past just like the actual like sitting watching a movie, like there's just so much that is great about this movie. Like they pulled off a lot, not only tackled a lot. And again, like I have never sat through a movie, and I sat through a lot of movies, including very dark, heavy movies that where I just felt like the whole time there was like a boulder on me, like literally
yeah,
that feeling of heaviness through like so many different forms of like emotions that was just happening like constant, like it did not let up, like it was wild. Um, had that effect on it. I mean, obviously it was always going to be very sad, like I mean,
yeah,
no matter what, but it was so much like more of that than I still would have expected. Um, yeah.
yeah. Right out the gate too, like opening scene.
Yeah. Oh my God. Side note, I have never been to a movie theater where the movie starts on the time of the, you know, like if it's at 7:30, that's when the previews start. That's every movie theater I've ever been to. That's how it works.
Oh, yours didn't play previews.
No, it did. It started before it, and the movie started at
Oh, yeah, no, ours mine did not do that.
just gotten there. So I literally sat down 2 minutes later, like it was dark and sure, started talking. I was like, holy shit, like I've never, I was like, oh my God. So it was so surreal for like the first like 5 minutes. I'm like, was not prepared for this. Like I just
Yeah, and it like starts so heavy, and then it goes into the Marvel Studios logo, and it's all Chadwick, and you're like, ah.
I've seen so many people talk about how their theater went silent with the
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's
dead.
just
Both times I watched it, my screening and at the actual like, it was very much. It was quiet. It was real quiet in there. I did. You didn't. I wasn't even worried that anyone would make a noise because during certain scenes, it was like, how could you make
fine
noise?
people. Like there's some guy in the back just talking. It's
Oh,
really
really?
yeah. And I was like
Wait.
a he was loud because he was in the back and I was not. But so there was some kid like a few seats from me just spilling his shit all the time, like just making so much noise. I'm like, stop,
Yeah,
stop.
there's what in my second showing there was a guy who fell asleep, but it was like a guy who clearly was there because someone else made him go. Like he wasn't interested. He was not interested from the start, and you could tell. And then he fell asleep and started snoring, and the person he was there with just started like hitting him. It was really funny. I liked it a lot. Um, okay, well, all that being said, is there anything else we want to like tackle, or do we think that's it for our little like Black Panther Wakanda Forever church?
I think about it. What was your favorite film of Phase 4? That we've had all our films of Phase.
Oh gosh, we're doing that.
Phase 4 isn't over technically, so
Technically, we still have Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. If we're not counting special presentations, and we're not, if we're just counting like the theatrically released films, it's either this or No Way Home. It's one of the two. I think that this is probably my favorite in terms of like how it was made. I think that this is the best made movie of Phase 4. I think that No Way Home, just because I love Spider-Man so deeply, I think that like I'm biased when I watch it. Like it brings me a certain level of joy, but I think that this is probably a better movie than that.
yeah. I mean, Spider-Man: No Way Home is gonna be like an all-time like iconic like comic book movie for like obvious reasons. But I do agree. I didn't think No Way Home like foundationally was like the world's best movie, and that's okay. So I agree with that. I love Shang-Chi. I
I
absolutely
do. That's
do.
the thing is like it's hard for me because I like Shang-Chi a lot. Um maybe I
People,
do. I like it a lot. It's just
yeah,
I think Wakanda Forever really hits in like a certain way that's hard to beat.
yeah,
And I think that No Way Home is just like I love Spider-Man, and it's hard to like it's hard when you get that the movie that movie was. It's hard to like not just have a smile on my face for most of it. But Shang-Chi is really good, and it sucks to like not include that in my top two because there had to be two really good movies to beat it. Let's put it that way.
no, that's fair. I mean, as much as people complain about Phase 4, some people, I mean, like it's hard to like pick out.
I liked Phase Four a lot, if we're being completely honest, and I like most of the TV shows. I really vibed with too. Like
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
know, I had fun with it.
yeah, no, it's definitely weird compared to others, but it's like in a new place in the
But that
universe.
was partly why I loved it because you could
Yeah.
just like
It was
anything could happen.
less than 2 years long, and it had the most content we've ever had in a phase, or just in general. It feels like honestly, so it is interesting. But yeah, yeah. So I Shang-Chi, I don't know. There's just something about it. It's like
It's
my
great.
five of all time MCU. But I do think the general conversation is Wakanda Forever, No Way Home, for sure, for different reasons. I keep it out.
Well, with that, I think we can close out. This is our longest church we've ever done, which is fitting because this is maybe the longest project we've ever had to do a church on. So yeah, I have been one half of your host, Hunter.
I have been one third of your host, Mary.
Do the math on that one later. Sit there, figure it out, think about it. Is there an answer? Yes. Are we gonna tell you? No. Is there really an answer? Who's to say? Maybe I'm messing with you. Um, for the past hour and 30 minutes, thank you so much for tuning in to the Universal Church of Truth. We will be back for the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. So hang on to your butts. And there's going to be maybe some more Theory Thursdays here and there. So keep checking out the Murphy's Multiverse YouTube channel. Clickety clack, clack, clack. Leave some comments. Let us know if you're watching because we really like to know that you guys are watching and we like to talk with you. So please, 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 let's talk to us. Yeah, it's been dandy. Peace out.